Hello and greetings once again from Peter Duveen. That's me. I'm trying to continue my evening presentations on civil defense. I've run into a few problems, technical problems, and perhaps even political problems that prevent me from getting on the air. Recently, Facebook has first made it difficult for me to get on the air, uh, saying that they require more security and they've had to send me a code first. Then, if I put that code in, I get back on. More recently, because of problems of getting the code, I had to submit my driver's license. Um, all well and good, except, of course, that the head of Facebook was in hearings with con- congressional people, and at that time, Congress seemed to pressure Facebook to censor its content, and Facebook allegedly complied with that. And this could be construed as a kind of collusion between Congress and Facebook to defraud Americans of their rights to free speech, which could be a great danger for all of us. In order to create and conduct and support public policy, we need a very free arena of speech in order for us to express ourselves, to do the proper research, and to have robust discussions on policy matters. So the fact that Congress has had these discussions with Facebook and it's all been done in public, I would say that this is something that has to be looked into as an illegal disenfranchisement of the American people from their free speech rights. But rather than go into that for too much longer, I'm going to shorten our presentations, and I am going to try and get right into the content. Maybe I can have the time that I usually spend to about 15 minutes or 12 minutes, so that these presentations are easily uploadable, and perhaps that will even be more convenient to yourselves who maybe don't have the 25 minutes or a half an hour right now to spend on civil defense matters, of which these presentations are, uh, you know, directed or whatever. That's the topic, okay? So, what I'm going to do is continue reading from the book, um, The Effects of the Atomic Bomb, 1950 revised edition, published by an arm of the U.S. government, probably the military, or I forget where it was, but something like that, in conjunction with Los Alamos National Laboratory. Okay, here we go. Pathology of radiation sickness. The discussion presented above has been largely concerned with overall symptoms of radiation sickness. Even the changes in blood are to a great extent indirectly due to the effect of the radiation on the bone marrow, etc. It is of interest, therefore, to consider briefly the pathological changes produced by radiation in some individual organs and tissues. The damage caused by radiation undoubtedly originates in the individual cells. Some of the effects of which have been observed by microscopic examination of cells are chromosome breaks, clumping of the chromatin, changes in cell division, increased granularity of the cytoplasm, swelling of the nucleus or of the entire cell, and complete disintegration of the cell. In addition, changes in the viscosity of the protoplasm and in the permeability of the cell membranes have been noted. Different types of cells show remarkable variation in their response to radiation. It has been stated that primitive, that is, less highly specialized cells, such as white blood corpuscles and reproductive cells, are more sensitive than are more highly specialized tissues, such as brain cells and nerve cells. However, although this rule applies in certain instances, it is not generally reliable. The giant amoeba, for example, which is a primitive cell, is very resistant to radiation, while the highly specialized ciliated epithelial cells of the bronchus of mammals have a high sensitivity. In general, it is the nucleus of the cell which reacts to radiation, whereas the cytoplasm is not so sensitive. Hence, a large cell with much cytoplasm, such as a giant amoeba, is not greatly affected by radiation, but a small cell containing a large percentage of nuclear material will be sensitive. Rapidly multiplying or actively reproducing cells are, on the whole, more radiosensitive than are those in a more quiescent state. Of the more common tissues, the radiosensitivity decreases in the following order. So, starting with the ones with the highest sensitivity, lymphoidal tissue and bone marrow, most highly sensitive, epithelial cells, testes and ovaries, salivary glands, skin, and mucous membrane, all examples of epithelial cells, endothelial cells of blood vessels and peritoneum, connective tissue cells, muscle cells, bone cells, and nerve cells. So nerve cells seem the least affected according to this, interestingly. It says the behavior of some of these tissues under the influence of radiation is outlined below. So I guess we're going to go through all of these different tissues and see what the effect is on each type. First of all, lymphoidal tissue. The lymphoid tissue is the tissue characteristic of lymph glands, tonsils, adenoids, spleen, and certain areas of the intestinal lining. Lymph glands found in various parts of the body are rounded masses of lymphoid tissue. They are not true glands, but a network of connective tissues, but a network of connected tissue fixed in the meshes of which are small round lymphoid cells having relatively large round, deeply staining nuclei. These cells, when mature, are carried off by the lymph fluid flowing through the gland and become the lymphocyte constituent of the white blood cells. As indicated in the preceding paragraph, the lymphoid tissue is the most radiosensitive of all tissues. Lymphoid cells are injured or killed when the tissue is exposed to radiation. Microscopic examination shows degenerative changes characteristic of cell death. The nuclei may stain deeper and be fragmented, and there may be vacuoles in the cytoplasm. The degeneration of lymphoid tissue, including the formation of cells of abnormal types, was an outstanding phenomenon in the victims of the atomic bombs in Japan and in the animals exposed at Bikini. Damage to lymphoid cells accounts for the decrease in the number of lymphocytes in the blood. For the radiation not only damages the lymphocyte-producing tissue, but it also kills or injures the cells within the blood. It appears to be established with some certainty that if no drop is detectable in the total number of lymphocytes within 72 hours of exposure to radiation, the dose has been too small to cause serious illness. So in other words, one great way to diagnose radiation poisoning or illness would be to see if you could measure the number of lymphocytes within 72 hours. It is of interest to note that if recovery from radiation sickness is to take place, the lymphocytes are the first cells to show signs of regeneration, as indicated by an increase of their number in the blood. Lymphoid tissue injured by radiation tends to become edemaceous. Not sure what that means, but we can all look it up, I guess. That is, they're going to tell us. That is, to swell due to the accumulation of serous fluid. This characteristic, related to throat tissues, contributed to the severe sore throats experienced at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The swellings became severely ulcerated and infected, so that breathing and swallowing was difficult. Wasting of the lymph glands, as well as of the tonsils and lymphoid patches of the intestines, was common among the radiation casualties in Japan. Okay, I'm going to read one more section on the bone marrow. We've seen how the lymphoid system is affected. Let's look at the bone marrow now, and then we'll end it. Bone marrow. Since most of the constituents of the blood, other than the lymphocytes, are manufactured in the bone marrow, the fact that this is very radiosensitive is of great significance. Under normal circumstances, the mature blood cells leave the marrow and make their way into the bloodstream. Here they remain for variable periods before being destroyed by natural processes. In general, the shorter the life of a particular type of blood cell, the more quickly it will reveal evidence of radiation injury by a reduction in the number of such cells circulating in the blood. This reduction is indicative of the inability of the affected lymph glands and bone marrow to manufacture more cells. The lymphocytes with the shortest lives are reduced first. Then the granulocytes and the platelets, or thrombocytes, the latter being important in connection with the clotting of blood. The number of the former may be increased at first, but later it decreases. I guess the lymphocytes, the granulocytes. The number of the red blood cells, which have the longest lives, are the last to show a reduction in the number after exposure to radiation. Bone marrow exhibits striking changes very soon after exposure. The tissue forming the blood cells ceases to function, and in some severe cases it was observed that tissue which normally produced granulocytes was forming plasma-like cells. Extreme atrophy of the bone marrow was characteristic of many of those dying from radiation sickness up to 3 or 4 months after exposure, although there was some evidence of attempts at repair and regeneration. In some instances, a gelatinous deposit had replaced the normal marrow tissue. So what we have here are two rather sensitive components of the human body, the lymphoid tissue and the bone marrow, both of which are involved in producing components of the blood. So radiation sickness then can probably be diagnosed by a blood test, possibly. Okay, everyone, I want to thank you for listening in. We're going to have more of this focus right now on the different reasons for radiation sickness, the different aspects of the human physiology that are affected by radiation. We'll just continue there. So thank you for coming tonight. As you can see, this is a podcast because actually I'm not able to go live at the moment on Facebook. But that may be a good thing. We may be able to view these videos on my YouTube channel as well. So thank you for listening in. Tonight is, by the way, it's March. I don't even have the date. What am I going to get here? Okay. March 27th, 9:45 p.m., but I'll try and post this around 10 p.m. on Facebook. We'll see if it works out. Thank you very much for coming, and I'll probably see you tomorrow night.